Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians, a casual sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area who love exploring every corner of the sports world. Each week, we break down sports stories, ideas, and theories in a way that's simple and fun.
Whether you're a lifelong fan or just curious about the game, there's something here for everyone.
Welcome back to the Chicagolandians podcast. I'm your host, Connor Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Patrick Cunningham.
Hello.
Pat, fantastic to have you on here today. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm going through a little bit of a cold right now, so if anyone is taken away by my smooth, deep, suave voice, that is why. And you don't hear a lot of my coughing. I've been coughing the whole day. It kind of stinks, but that's kind of how my day is going. I also didn't have a great day of bowling today, so, got highlights, lowlights, whatever.
Those seem like two lowlights, but I guess
I think highlight was I got the chance to bowl.
Okay.
Just
Every day is a
getting the
gift from God.
opportunity.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fair. Well, I'm glad to hear it, man. Last week I had a case of the Mondays. Seems like you might have a case of the Tuesdays. It's going around, spreading around these days. On this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about some free agency news. It has now been 2 days since the legal tampering period for NFL free agency has started. We're also going to talk a little bit, or a lot of bit, about the Bears Stadium and stadium updates in Arlington and Chicago with our cousin, Kevin Donahue, who is a recurring guest on the show. Pat, how's that sound to you?
That sounds great. There's been a lot of moves in only the past 2 days. And dare I say the Bears are back?
So, yeah, I wanted to say that as our first piece of news is that the Bears are back. That's kind of the main piece of news that we have. So I know, and before we've broken news about Ian Cunningham, kind of that's been fake news, and I know fake news is kind of always a topic of discussion in this political climate, but I do think Bears back is not fake news, and you can see that from any media outlet, including the failing New York Times. So I'm excited that the Bears are officially back. Pat, how's that sound to you? Does that sound pretty good?
It sounds great. Yeah.
All right, so let's move into some free agency talk for the Chicago Bears. So on Monday, Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson, and the rest of the Chicago Bears staff got right to work. First signing that we are going to talk about is Drew Dalman of the Atlanta Falcons. We signed him to a 3-year, $42 million deal. Math geeks out there will realize that that's $14 million a year. On paper, he was the top center in free agency. Over the past 3 seasons, he's had 40 starts. He has had a grade of 95.1 pass block win rate in 2024, which is the 9th among centers. He's a great run blocker. He's had a lot of talk about his zone scheme, and he's in line with Ben Johnson's desire to run the football. In 2024, he only had 9 games due to a left ankle injury, and he is now being paid as the second highest paid center in the league. So a high price tag attached to him and maybe some injury concerns with the left ankle. But I think Drew Dalman was the belle of the ball for the Chicago Bears. He was the last infinity stone for this Thanos gauntlet that we have on the offensive line after signing Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, it seemed like we were just missing our center, and Drew Dalman kind of slides right in there into the center of the line as a impact player for the Chicago Bears. Pat, what do you think?
I'm very excited. I can't remember the last time we made a big splash signing offensive line. Usually when we go through,
we signed Ryan Bates last year, so if you forgot about that.
Usually when we look at these players and we look at these stats, we see like, okay, he's only had 4 starts in the last 6 seasons, but one of those starts he had an 100% win rate, and in college he was an All-Pro. And we gave up a 4th round pick for him. So it's like, oh, okay.
Okay, that
But
makes
now
sense.
it's like we went out and got the top center in free agency, the guy everybody wants, and everybody says, oh, this would be the right player to take. And then we went out and got the right player to take. It just speaks to, I think, the changing of the guard that is Ben Johnson. With now we have the second highest paid center in the league. This is a team that now hopes to run the ball very successfully. Now, it's going to be awkward if somehow halfway through next season, our offensive line stinks and we're still paying this guy second most money in the league, but I think that's just the Doomer
That would
Bears fan
be
in me.
super awkward.
That's just
I
the
would hate
Bears
that.
Doomer fan in me. No, but I'm very excited. Very, very excited.
Yeah, I think my contribution is my freshman year. There was a girl named Julie Dalman. Kind of something to think about. But overall, I'm just very excited about the move. I think it's, again, kind of like the Ben Johnson hire. It seems like the Bears are entering an era of common sense, making the right moves on paper, even if they don't work out. We're a process over results kind of podcast, and I think it's the right move for the future of Caleb Williams and the future of this franchise. I think another thing about Dalman and choosing to address the line primarily through free agency, we've talked about this before, but taking the time to try to address the offensive line through the draft, that could lead to a couple of years of turmoil with the offensive line. The Bears don't necessarily have time with that with Caleb Williams right now entering year 2 of his rookie contract. We got to strike while the iron's hot, so we want to bring in veteran presences like Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, and Drew Dalman to help bring about some prosperous play from this offensive line. So right now, I'm all for it. Moving on. We also signed Grady Jarrett. He is a veteran from the Atlanta Falcons, defensive lineman. Signed him to a 3-year, $43 million deal, or almost $44 million deal. He's a second-team All-Pro and 2-time Pro Bowler. I think Jarrett comes into Chicago and provides us with a lot of depth on the defensive line. We saw it last year with Andrew Billings going down. Depth was a huge problem for the Chicago Bears. So I really think he provides both a veteran presence and a lot of reliable depth on the defensive line. I think the main knock on him right now is that he recently suffered an ACL injury, not this year, but the previous year in 2023. I think the main question right now is how much juice Grady Jarrett has left in the tank. But I think at the very least he provides depth for the defensive line. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, just to hit on that point one more time, it seems like since tearing his ACL, he has not quite been the same player. I think in the last 2 seasons, he's only recorded 4 sacks, which is not the same statistic as it is for defensive ends, but still, like, you don't want to have 4 sacks. You want to have more than 4 sacks.
5 sacks.
I think, yeah. I think the one thing that I would also like to say is just with the offensive line and defensive line, it's great that we're signing all of these veteran talents and like signing great players right now. But I hope it doesn't, and I don't think it will, but I hope like Ryan Poles doesn't see this as like, okay, I fixed the offensive line and defensive line. Because like obviously we have in the short term, but in only 2 to 3 years, we're going to be right back where we started because all of these linemen that we have signed are over 30 years old right now. So right when Caleb Williams should be getting his $70 million a year contract after, he's the best quarterback in the league, we're going to be out of linemen. So I hope that, we still continue to address our needs at defensive line and offensive line in the draft, even though it is slower to build. I think now that we have this good foundation of veterans, we can slowly in the background start to craft the next up-and-coming defensive and offensive line, develop the trenches.
I agree, and especially with some of the young players we have on this offensive line, thinking primarily of Karan Amagaji, I think this veteran presence that we've brought in really is going to help a player like him develop into a quality lineman in this league. We know that he has a lot of the intangibles, a lot of the tools that make him profile as a good offensive lineman, but he's just overall a very green player. So I think being surrounded by these veteran presences on the offensive line will hopefully help him develop into a great lineman for the Bears and for the future. All right, moving on. Another player we signed from the Indianapolis Colts, Dayo Odengbo. We signed him to a 3-year, $48 million deal. Now I'm just going to get out in front. Dayo, if we mispronounce your name, I apologize. Come onto the podcast and we can talk about it, but sorry if I mispronounce your name. He will be 26 this season. He's a big guy. He fits the Dennis Allen profile. He's 6'5", 280 pounds with 35-inch arms, about 3 inches longer than those little T-Rex chode arms on Will Campbell. I think the main cons with him, though, is that he is not a finished product. A lot of his snaps in the 61 games have been as a backup and only 19 starts. Pat, going back to your point about Ryan Bates and typical other linemen that we've had, Dayo kind of fills that role. Yeah. Kind of very similar to DeMarcus Walker when we signed him before. It's kind of like, oh, okay, he had 8 sacks, but on limited opportunities. So, you project that out maybe as a 20-sack guy. Dayo here is kind of not had a lot of production. He had 3 sacks last year, but you think like, okay, maybe he can develop into something. We're certainly paying him a lot of money. Obviously, with the salary cap increasing, contracts everywhere have increased, but I think overall, we're really betting on him elevating his game for the Chicago Bears, and I don't know necessarily if we have a lot of the talent there to help him with that. With Montez Sweat coming off of kind of a slow year, hopefully maybe Grady Jarrett and Andrew Billings can help turn him into the finished product we're hoping him to be, but overall, this was a signing that I was less excited about for the Bears.
Yeah, not great. Glad we got Jarrett and had a lot of good signings on the offensive line. But this was one that was confusing. I mean, obviously, Myles Garrett and Max Crosby just got defensive end contracts averaging $35 and $40 million a year. So, like, $16 million seems like a drop in the hat relative to other defensive ends. But for a guy that has had 19 starts in 61 games and hasn't really proven it as like an established defensive end, $16 million is still a lot of money to get. We could get a Saquon Barkley, I think, for $16 million a year, I think. I am, like you said, Connor, I think I'm less excited. I don't feel like we have the infrastructure to develop defensive ends like this. Like, it's jury's still out on if Austin Booker is going to turn into like this next supreme defensive end. I don't know.
Jury's very out on that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I don't know if we have the veteran presence. We have Sweat there, but Sweat had a huge down year last year, and now we have a new defensive coordinator. I'd be concerned if we can develop him into like the premium edge rusher that we hope he can become. But I guess just on a pure traits perspective, this guy is huge.
Big guy.
Yeah, it's funny to actually look at the stats of players that have made it in the NFL or have made it like 4 or 5 years in the NFL compared to the combine, because like just naturally with the way everything filters out, like all the players that have made it to their second contract are obviously like freak athletes and are 6'5", 280 with 35-inch arms. Like they are everything that they have, none of the problems that like the Will Campbells you see people talk about. Because that is a long dude. But yeah, we will see. It's a lot of money. If he turns out to be good, that'd be great, but less excited.
That would be awesome, yeah. I agree. All right, moving on. We got a couple electric acquisitions. This isn't necessarily through free agency. This is more through the trade block. This is Big Dick Poles, King Poles kind of working his magic for the Chicago Bears. We mentioned both of them already, but Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs acquired him for a 2026 fourth-round pick. The pros, he was a back-to-back first-team All-Pro, arguably the best guard in the NFL, and he leads the NFL in pass block win rate at guard for every season since 2021. How many seasons have the Bears had a guard lead since 2021 in pass block win rate? Pat, I'm going to throw that to you.
I would bet
it's a goose egg for the visual audio listeners there. It's a goose egg. Also, way less prone than Tevin Jenkins. Jenkins, his biggest knock is his availability or his lack of availability. The dude is made of paper. Joe Thuney made of cinder blocks. Jenkins missed 22 games over the first 4 years of his career, while Thuney has missed 2 starts over his 9-year NFL career. 2 starts. That's insane. I believe he's a 4-time Super Bowl champion. He spent time with the Patriots as well. The guy knows how to win football games. Q talked about it before on this podcast. The Bears lacked a serious veteran presence on this offensive line, with Darnell Wright being maybe the biggest veteran presence that we were going to have on this line, with Tevin Jenkins probably leaving. Joe Thuney steps in and is not only a fantastic blocker, but is also the locker room presence that you need for young guys like Karan Amagaji, Darnell Wright, and Braxton Jones to develop into serious players in this league. Loved the signing. The main con is that he is entering the final year of his contract at 32 years old. So he is a little old. Inevitably, he's not going to be on the team for 9 or 10 years. But as I've always said with the Bears, the age concern is wishful thinking. If we're upset at him being too old for the Bears, that means that things have probably gone well for the franchise. If I'm upset in 2 years that he's going to retire, hopefully that means that we have at least had some success. I'm not going to worry about his age until we start seeing the product on the field. But Pat, I mean, you had to be excited about Joe Thuney. What were your thoughts there? I know you're a big Thuney guy.
Oh, incredibly excited. I mean, this is just very similar to the Dalman situation. This was like the player that there had been rumors that he'd be on the trade block, and like Bears fans in their wildest dreams were like, oh, it'd be so sweet if we got this guy. Someone who was legitimately like statistically the best guard in the league, right? And then we just go out and get him, right? Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I think that veteran presence that he brings is going to be a huge asset to this team, especially compared to Jenkins, who was seemed like he was kind of a frustration off the field. Seems like he had locker room issues. I feel like every interview he gave was kind of like, I don't really like this guy's response. And then obviously was always hurt. I think this is a fantastic, unbelievable upgrade. Like you said, Connor, he's defended Tom Brady and Pat Mahomes, the two GOATs. And I think he's about to line up for the third GOAT.
That's a stable of GOATs right there.
Now, Connor, can I break some news to you real quick that is related to our Dio news?
Sure.
Can I break some news to you? Okay, so breaking news.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. Okay, so the Buffalo Bills, I don't know if you saw this, just signed Joey Bosa. Did you see that, Connor?
Yes. That did come across my ticker taker, yeah.
Okay, so he was just signed for 1 year, $12.6 million a year. Now we're paying Dio $16 million. I don't know much about Bosa's production. Obviously, it seems like it has lessened, but man, I feel like I would rather have Joey
Is it
Bosa.
$4 million less? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that right now. He hasn't had a 10-sack season since 2021, but it was a Pro Bowler this year. Is 29 though, Pat? Did you consider that the age of Joey Bosa?
No, I did not. That's a good point. I just think it was surprising to see his stats recently. As like I kind of figured he would be just like his brother Nick Bosa, who I guess I don't know his stats either, but I assume I would put him in like the top 5 edge rushers. So seeing him only get signed for $12.5 million when Myles Garrett, who is older than him, just got signed for $40 million. Surprising. Sorry to interrupt the show, but I thought that it was worth noting in relationship to Dio.
No, I mean that's why we got the P-Bone Zone, the P-Bone News Zone. That's why we have it there. Glad you chimed in with that. So moving on, before the Joe Thuney signing, we signed Jonah Jackson, or acquired Jonah Jackson from the Los Angeles Rams for a 2025 6th-round pick. So he was with Detroit from 2022 to 2020 to 2023, and he started 25 games with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. In 2024, he posted a career-high 94.7 pass block win rate, but only played in 4 games because of a shoulder injury, so it's kind of a cherry-picking stat that you got there. Again, kind of hitting on Pat's point of, well, I guess theoretically you could just extrapolate that to be happening, I guess, the entire season. He probably would have considered a 94% win rate there. So I guess conservatively you could say he's the best lineman in the league. But I think the main thing with him right now is that his availability, he seems like he might struggle with that. He also, I believe, was benched by the Rams last year at center. He's a natural guard. So it's nice that, at least with the Bears, he can play guard again. But I think this signing is the one that makes me the most hesitant compared to the other offensive line signings that we've had. But I think this one, you just have to trust Ben Johnson, trust what he's seen in Jonah Jackson, and trust that he still has juice left in the tank. Because we're paying him a boatload of money, $17.5 million, which is $1.5 million more than Dio Odengbo. So kind of that Odengbo scale, it makes you go, oh, dang, bro. Am I right? So hopefully he can still get some good production out of him. He is currently 28 years old, so at least under the 30 mark. But overall, this one definitely made me the most nervous. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that, sorry. I'm looking at stats right now. So this is going to make Jonah Jackson is now the 5th highest guard in the NFL right now at $17 million. Or the 5th highest left guard, I guess, looking at these statistics right now. And for someone that has only played 4 games last year is a little concerning. our line has quickly become one of the most expensive lines in the NFL, I think, at least this interior three. Like, we have just spent a boatload of money, which, to be fair, is what everybody asked us to do. That's like what Bears fans were begging for. We said, we don't need more. We don't need more weapons. You can save your T. Higgins. You can save your Ashton Jenkins.
Man, what if we got T. Higgins, though?
That'd be sweet, but yeah, you can we don't need, we would love Myles Garrett, but we don't want to spend money on that. Just spend money on the offensive line, and then we do it. Would I have liked to sign someone that had played more than 4 games last year? Of course, sure. But I think this is like a more confident signing than we've seen in the past. I guess maybe the money just makes me think that it should make sense. Still makes me nervous, though. It is not as complete of a piece. When you think of our line right now, I think that right tackle, we got that figured out. We got that center position figured out. Whatever side Tooney plays on, we got that figured out. But then Braxton and Jackson, I feel like, are still kind of not set in stone, and that makes me a little uneasy. Although I guess it would be unrealistic to say Johnson could completely cement this offensive line in 2 days, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we will see. I think the main takeaway is that the Detroit Lions of last year and the year before were spearheaded by dominant offensive line play. And despite the playmakers that they had at tight end, receiver, and running back, and quality quarterback play, it was the offensive line that made that team successful. And it's clear that Ben Johnson is trying to implement that same strategy in Chicago, which honestly is a great strategy. It seems like that's an obvious, common sense strategy that Ryan Poles could have done, but I'm glad that it's getting deployed right now. But I think that's going to do it for our free agency talk. We're going to talk a little bit more with Kevin Donahue about free agency, but I think that's going to do it. I think we're going to send you over to our friends, Connor and Pat at the Chicagolandians, for a interview with Kevin Donahue. So hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, and welcome back to the Chicagolandians. We are joined today by a very special guest, friend of the pod, cousin of the pod, reoccurring guest, Kevin Donahue. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing swell. Wow. All 3 titles in that introduction. Nice.
Yeah.
Doing great, boys. A lot of exciting stuff happened in the last 24 hours. Good time to be a Bears fan.
Dare I say Bears are back, but it is quite a good time to be a Bears fan. I feel like I've probably said that the last 2 off seasons, so it's maybe something that I like saying as a Bears fan, but at least on the surface you got to feel excited.
Oh my God, 3-year offseason champs. It doesn't get much better than that. We're the king of the offseason.
Third time's a charm. We know these are all gonna. This is the beginning of, like you guys have said in previous podcasts, like one of a dozen Super Bowls.
Yes. We ran some simulations. I think a couple Super Bowls are in the future.
We were just 1 year off.
So on this episode, we're going to hit a little bit on some free agency. There was some big movements on free agency, especially from Bears and inside Hallis Hall. But the main thing we want to talk about is stadium updates. So it's been about a year since Kevin last came on the pod. At that time, we were talking a little bit about the basic renderings for the stadium and maybe what a plan in Arlington would look like, or what a revamped stadium would look like in Chicago. But we kind of wanted to see where we're at right now, where Kevin Warren is at with the stadium, and see if anything is really being made of the situation right now, or if it's kind of just a lot of noise coming out of Chicago, Arlington, and Hallis Hall. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so let's get into it. So just to hit, kind of grease the wheels here, there's been a lot of movement right now in free agency. Specifically today was the start of the legal tampering period, so we saw pretty much within maybe the first 10 minutes of free agency opening, Ryan Poles, King Poles, Big Poles made a big move signing Drew Dalman, a 26-year-old center from the Atlanta Falcons. He was seen by, I assume, the majority of people as the top center available on the market right now, and it was the glaring hole for the Chicago Bears on that offensive line. So to see us act swiftly and go sign a guy like Drew Dalman, I'm pretty excited about that, especially considering last year our first signing in free agency was DeAndre Swift. So I feel like this is a much more exciting, or at least better signing than DeAndre Swift. Kevin, what'd you think of it?
I was kind of surprised that we were able to get him. Like you said, he was the number 1 center that was on the market. and just it was one of those things where on the heels of Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney, I'm
Mhm.
like, there's no way that we're gonna get like the completion of our interior old line done with like the top free agent center, and they got it done. I mean, hats off to King Poles.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it looks like they are seriously looking to use that available cap space and using it in all the right places.
Yeah. I mean, can't take it with you, man. Pat, what'd you think?
I'm very excited. It's very refreshing to see us get linemen that are not like, I feel like every lineman we've signed with the past 2 years with the Bears fans, we have to do so many mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that they're going to be actually a fantastic starter and not going to lead to 70 or 65 sacks from Caleb. So it's really refreshing to see us get like, oh, this guy has been an all pro, has been, was the second best, was a fantastic player last year and played 9 games and isn't incredibly injury prone. No, incredibly excited, especially like you said, Connor, when you compare it to last year when like as soon as free agency started, Poles literally could not wait to sign
Get
DeAndre
DeAndre Swift in the building. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
couldn't waste a second. To now see us sign somebody that is legitimately going to help this team so much is very exciting.
I know. Last year, trying to figure out how Ryan Bates, who didn't start for the Bills, made sense for a fourth. You just had to kind of like work that
Lots
through
of
your mind
gymnastics
to
with that one.
figure out
Yeah.
why this is. Yeah, this is a good idea. And you come into the offseason, the past 2 off seasons, you're like, all right, biggest thing we need to fix is our offensive line. And you've kind of exited both those offenses off seasons being like, I don't really know if we did anything. We just kind of signed a bunch of crappy linemen. So it's exciting this time to see, at least on paper, that we've made some moves. And Bears made a couple of other moves on the defensive side of the ball, signing former Falcons Grady Jarrett as well as Dio Odengo from the Indianapolis Colts. Jarrett, he's 31 years old. He's a long-term veteran, 2-time Pro Bowler. Dio is more of a younger player coming in off of a 3-sack season last year, 8 the previous year. So looking to be a little bit more of a developmental player. He can play inside and outside as well. Grady Jarrett kind of wondering if he still's got some juice left in the tank, but definitely has had a successful career in Atlanta. But overall, I think these couple moves, I think the main takeaway is that this kind of opens us up to have flexibility moving into the draft. I think especially at the 10 when this is maybe a little bit, the draft might be lacking premier blue chip talent, especially at positions that we're interested in, maybe at like tackle. I think it's important to try to have as much flexibility as you can in the draft to just try to go best player available. And I think these moves have allowed us to do that. While we certainly have not solved our offensive line with like Braxton Jones still being there, and it's not like we have filled every hole in this roster, I think it at least gives us some more flexibility heading into the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking that before we jumped on that, we might be in a position where whoever the best player available is, we kind of have the latitude to just, select them. I still think that as much as I've heard about Odeyingo and how good he is, I think that at edge we still because I mean I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Who did we draft? I think it was like the third round last year.
Booker?
Austin
Yeah,
Booker.
Austin Booker. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and he had a couple starts last season, and he's really good. But I just think that it can't hurt to
Mhm.
maybe use that first pick on just kind of building out our defensive ends. But we could do what everybody says we're going to do and uh, draft a running back.
Yeah.
But yeah, but no, it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
All of these moves more and more seem like it might be leading to Genty at the number 10. I think like these 3 signings for the line makes it seem like Johnson is having a huge influence and wants to establish this line more so for having a dominant run game. And I feel like right now we can't have that with just DeAndre Swift. I feel like we need that number 2 running back. If it is Genty, I don't know if I'd love that at 10. It'd be really fun. That'd be like a
Hmm.
classic, ignore all the noise, look at this new shiny toy we got with Genty.
Running backs are
But
hot right now, man.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
Very hot.
Yeah.
so
I'm excited to see what happens though.
yeah, I mean, do you guys think he'll be available at 10? I mean, because he is hands down like the the best running back in the draft. Um, I don't know, but I've seen what the projections are for like the other guys that are projected to go in the top nine. I don't know. I just feel like there's a chance that he might not be available, but I don't
Yeah.
know if your guys' thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a chance that he doesn't get there. I remember, I feel like it hasn't been since Bijan came out that there's been like the same level of player, at least comparatively. I feel like Genti positionally, yeah, doesn't have as much value as other players, but I would argue he's like a top 5, top 4, like
Hmm.
just pure player from a talent perspective in the class. I mean, you look in the top 10, and there's definitely teams that are not a running back away from winning in this league. So I think if there's some smart managers, I think maybe he could find his way. But I think like with the Raiders maybe shoring up their like quarterback position with Geno Smith, I could see like maybe they end up taking Genti. But I guess we'll see. You know, I think I've become willing to accept the fact that Genti might be a player. I think I would be excited for it as a fantasy football player. I think it'd be fun. Maybe as the responsible pick, maybe not. But I'm just gonna put my trust in Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles and whatever they see as the correct move, I'm gonna put my full faith and confidence behind it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. They've earned a lot of
Yeah,
goodwill from me based on what we've seen over the last couple of days. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, before we move on, just wanted to hit on another quick piece of news we had here is that Justin Fields, former Chicago Bear, friend of the pod, did sign with the New York Jets on a 2-year, $40 million deal. So he's going to get $30 million guaranteed. Justin Fields had a very tough time on the Chicago Bears. He's probably looking at these free agency signings right now and wondering what took so long for the Chicago Bears to make these moves. But Justin, hope the best for you in New York. I know it's kind of the seat's warm right now with Aaron Rodgers' presence there, but I think maybe fresh scenery will help Justin.
I I think that it is. I mean, I'm right there with you. I hope he does find success. Just because there is still that appreciation for when he was good. He was really good, and he was really fun to
Yeah.
watch. So, and the way he departed, the Bears was like couldn't have been probably more humiliating. But the fact that he is replacing Aaron Rodgers on the Jets just makes it that much more sweet. And just you just want to see him go lights out and actually deliver the Jets a winning season on the heels of Aaron Rodgers being disgracefully dismissed
Man,
by the Jets.
yeah. I would love nothing more to see that. It's exciting to see him go back with Garrett Wilson. Maybe New York will be the place for him.
It is funny to check Twitter again and seeing people do Justin Fields appreciation posts and his highlights for his throwing abilities. They're still showing Ohio State highlights of him throwing, which is just like, I mean, just really speaks to the career that he's had and obviously is able to be a fantastic passer and has shown it in college, but like the sample size in the NFL of stuff like that
Yeah,
is small.
yeah. If your hits are from college, that's not great. But
Yeah, right.
Going back to what you mentioned about potential landing spots for Rodgers, I was seeing something about the Steelers
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that'll be interesting seeing Russie and Rodgers
What
battling
a
it out.
room.
I
What a
mean that's when
Senior
you're like,
citizens.
bring back Hard Knocks to this room. I want to see this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess especially with Sam Darnold getting signed by the Seahawks, I think the Steelers could be a definite landing spot. Okay, but let's get into the meat and potatoes of this interview here. We want to talk about stadium updates for the Chicago Bears. So we talked with Kevin Donahue here about 1 year ago about a possible movement either to Arlington Heights or to a revamped stadium in the city of Chicago. So let's just talk about where we left off. So in March of 2024, the Bears announced a plan to build a new stadium along the downtown lakefront at Museum Campus. In April, they released renderings of proposed stadium with an estimated price tag of roughly $5 billion. Now, Kevin, you pointed this out, and I think a lot of other people pointed this out too. It did look like a color swap of Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas with some fun like stadium surrounding it. I think something we also noticed is a lack of parking. Maybe we would have to park in the lake or under the lake. But I think a lot of people kind of thought that this proposal and these renderings were more of just for show than real value that they're presenting. I know while Mayor Johnson was in favor of this idea, J.B. Pritzker said that this deal and this proposal was somewhat of a non-starter, especially when you thought about the funding, which was the biggest question for the stadium. The Bears were proposed to pay about $2 billion in funding, and was hoping to get the remainder of that from the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, like $1 billion from them, and then the rest of the money from other sources. So I feel like the largest question was, who the hell is going to pay for all of this? But that's kind of where we left off then. From there, there's kind of just been a lot of rumblings about possible different locations for the Chicago Bears Stadium. There's been some talk about Bronzeville in the former Michael Reese Hospital in Bronzeville. There's been some talk in February about Northwest Indiana. But overall, there's been like a ton of cities or towns in the Chicagoland area that have talked about possibly being suitors for the Chicago Bears, including Naperville, Waukegan, Aurora, Rockford, Country Club Hills. Everybody has put their name in the ring for the Chicago Bears. But I think the main thing is there's been a lot of talk so far about the stadium, not a lot of substance. So that's kind of where we wanted to bring Kevin, you in here today. Now talk to us. What are you hearing about the Chicago Bears Stadium? What are your thoughts of what's happened in the past year? Do you think anything real substantial has happened? Do you think it's all kind of just fluff? Kevin Warren kind of just getting his feet wet, or what do you think's going on?
So I think that since we last spoke, I put out a theory on that podcast a year ago where I thought that there's a chance that Kevin Warren was playing 3D chess, where he was candid with Brandon Johnson, the mayor, and said, "Okay, look, it's not going to happen, but I know that your campaign for reelection is struggling. Your approval ratings are low. I mean, now they're even lower. So I think that this would help you in just giving it sort of an early sign of approval." And it'll give me, a bargaining chip for dealing with Arlington Heights. I don't know if that was the case. I think it might have came down to I don't think he knew the history of the Bears. I think that he came into it a little bit naive, thinking that what worked maybe for him in Minnesota could be copy and pasted for Chicago, at least with. Okay, you have an NFC North team, you have a rabid fan base, and we'll at least get something from the city. And that didn't turn out to be the case. When you look at what deal they ultimately did strike with Arlington Heights on the tax, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket, compared to what you would have paid anyway. And I understand, they're not, the wealthiest of owners, the McCaskies. It's not like they have an unlimited pool of money. I understand that. But when you look at the amount of time wasted, the amount, and to a point that Kevin Warren brought up, which is that for every year that passes, you basically throw on another 100 million, or a couple hundred million in the cost to build it. And I'm like, okay, so if you already delayed this thing by a year, you basically got a savings of $6 million and potentially increased your costs to build by several $100 million. So it's just, and I think that when after that kind of disastrous presentation of basically Allegiant Stadium, like south of Soldier Field, and everyone was pointing out the same things. It's like, there's no parking. Bears fans, all NFL fans love to tailgate. And I mean, maybe we go on and on about all the things that were wrong with it. But since then, I think he's realized that, okay, if I really want to get a shovel in the ground, I need to, get grips on reality and understand that, okay, it looks like there is no spigot of money coming from the state, no matter where they put it. Like the Michael Reese I mean, logistically, it would have been just as fine. I mean, if he wants to have a really great skyline over those aerial shots at home
Mhm.
games, I mean, you'll get that from the Michael Reese site. But I think you
Yeah.
realize that, like, okay, you know, with Arlington Heights, you own the property, you have enough space to develop, add a sports book, add a bunch of other revenue generating properties. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell me my thoughts.
In this current point, do you think his current plan or his desire is to put it in Chicago or to put it in Arlington?
I mean, I think that he at this point just wants to get something built,
Yeah.
something that
I think that's what we want too. Yeah.
all of
That's
us
what everybody
wanted a
wants.
year ago. And also one thing that's worth bringing up. So Virginia McCaskey passed away,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I think that that would her passing away adds another element of unknown for anyone in Springfield. Like they were reluctant to give money before. Now they don't know what the ownership is going to look like. I
Mm.
Yeah.
mean, the only thing we've ever heard from George McCaskey is like a one sentence response that he gave several years ago, saying that there's a plan in place for when Virginia passes for it to
Right.
stay in the family. That could be just, who knows what that means? That
Yeah.
could be a handshake that he has with his, handshake agreement he has with 16 family members of his, or however much it's been chopped up. But yeah, so I think that that also is lighting a fire under Kevin Warren to be like, okay, now there's definitely not going to be any appetite for like state money. So it's just like, I might as well do what I can. And so that's why I think that they resurrected that traffic and financial feasibility study.
Yeah, so that's the main update that's kind of happened with the stadium. So the most recent piece of news that has come out is that in February, their Arlington Heights has moved forward with a previously passed traffic study for Arlington Park. So at least from a eagle-eyed view, it appears that there's momentum starting up again for an Arlington stadium for the Chicago Bears. Well, the Arlington mayor, Tom Hayes, has said that this is far from a done deal. I think there was some speculation that this was pointing to a done deal in Arlington. He was, hesitant to say the least. He's saying that there's still a lot of work to be done here. So the original timeline for this was that in 2022, Arlington Heights approved an agreement to do a traffic and parking study and analysis for the Chicago Bears. And then in 2023, this study was paused by the Chicago Bears due to property tax disputes, which you talked about earlier, Kevin. So in December of 2024, the Arlington Board and school districts, they settled with the Bears and came to an agreement for these property tax issues. And then in February and March, the traffic review started up again by Chicago Bears. So they sent a letter that they wanted to resume this in Arlington, and now it seems like they're going to start this again, doing a traffic and parking analysis with the Bears. So it seems at the very least that they're still at least trying to show that they're interested in Arlington. Like you were talking about, maybe this is another leverage piece for Kevin Warren, or maybe they're just really trying to learn more about Arlington and see the prosperity or the prospects of this. But that's at least the newest piece of news that we have in the timeline of the Chicago Bears stadium. Kevin, did you have any opinions on this, or what did this make you think?
I think they're done with leveraging. I think
Yeah.
I think they know that they don't have any sort of appetite remaining from the fans. From like, if they were to try to pull another stunt like this again,
Yeah.
with a head fake, I don't. People are already sort of the fans' response is basically like, tell me when you have a shovel in the ground. Until
Hmm.
Yeah.
then, you don't deserve any more of my attention. We'll focus on the quality on the field. And let us know when you have an update. So I don't think that he's going to have any sort of audience that could sort of sway, whether it's Arlington Heights officials or Chicago or state officials. I think that my assumption is that them continuing this study is the first step towards them eventually going to Arlington Heights. But even, I mean, whatever. Kevin Warren, he still has like one card left. I guess that he's hoping,
Yeah.
one Uno card left, and that he's thinking there's a chance maybe he could do something in the city. But I think that he realistically is like, all right, because he keeps saying, "Oh, our focus is on Chicago."
Yeah.
I think that over the next month or so, I think you'll see him just drop that act, and I think that they'll announce something. But I wouldn't be surprised if this traffic and financial feasibility study continuing is ultimately so that they could probably maybe go into the private credit market, because this is the kind of information that you kind of pull together before you try to borrow money, substantial money. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
If you were to just to bring everybody up to date and just kind of refresh people from last year, if you were to say like what would need to change from now to like maybe a month and a half later for Kevin Warren and the current situation to like make Warren want to stay in Chicago, like what aspects would need to change to keep the stadium in Chicago versus Arlington?
I think if what was the ask for the city again? Like all in, it would be like the hotel tax would be what 500 million, and then 500 million from that Illinois Sports Authority, and then $1 billion from the slush fund. I don't know, like a
Yeah.
billion. Yeah, yeah. I think that if if Chicago were to come back and be like, all right, you do it at the Michael Reese site. There's infrastructure, left over from the hospital that could be repurposed. And
Mhm.
by the way, we're not going to give you 2 billion. We'll maybe consider 750 million to a billion. Maybe that
Mhm.
would change his things, but I don't know. But what reason would the state or city have to do that? I mean, they are in such bad financial shape. I mean, both the state and the city.
Mhm.
And, there's so many unknowns about, the future ownership of the team and who you would be dealing with. I mean, if you're someone if you're either Pritzker or, just forgot his name, but the
Johnson.
mayor's got, yeah. Um, you know, if there's a chance that a Jeff Bezos could come along and acquire all the shares that George McCaskey doesn't have,
Mhm.
or Pat Ryan doesn't have, and they become the majority owner of that, and they decide to pay for their own stadium with their own billions of dollars, that's a possibility. That's a real possibility right now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what if that's even out there? Why would the city feel any urgency to, try to make a deal? So, I mean, I think that back, when they did the first renovation, or well, I guess the most recent renovation of Soldier Field, I think that Mayor Daley, kind of felt pressure to do that because Ted Phillips was speculating about Gary, Indiana.
Mm. Yeah.
And I don't think that that's even a possibility now. I don't think they would try to use that for negotiating,
Yeah.
but now I just think it's a totally different environment.
Yeah.
Ted Phillips was threatening to move the team to Gary, Indiana. That was on
That's
the
a tough
ticket.
It
sell. That's
was
a tough sell.
That's insane. Holy.
it's when I say threaten, I mean he's not he wasn't as public figure as Kevin Warren apparently is.
Mm.
But based on people who were close to discussions with the Bears, that was something that they were putting out there.
Yeah.
And like Mayor Daley was saying stuff like, "Well, you can't call the Chicago Bears, even though it's their trademark. They can do whatever they want with it." Um,
Yeah.
but no, that was something that was being thrown out there.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point with ownership. I know Mark Gannis went on Chicago radio recently and talked about, behind closed doors, or at least his sources make it seem that George is committed to keeping the team in Chicago, or, keep the ownership within the McCaskies. There's been nothing publicly said about it, to your point. So I do think that there's a lot of uncertainty right now of what's going to happen with that. But I think something that's interesting that came out last year was the idea of private equity getting involved with football. And I think recently we saw the Giants and the 49ers both tease the idea or are moving forward with the idea of, I think, 10% of the team putting it up for private equity consumption. So
Mm-hmm.
I think with that idea, especially with the main focus of the Bears, the main problem of the stadium right now is being funding. Is that something that you guys would be interested in, with like the Bears getting involved with this? Kevin Warren talked about it in London for the Jags game, and he said it's something that he hasn't done a lot of research in or is not interested at the current moment. But what would you guys think if that was something that the Bears ended up doing?
I think right now, as long as it does not become a like majority ownership, which I don't think that's allowed right now with the rules. But yeah, it seems like the perfect solution to get an influx of cash. I know for the 49ers and the Giants, selling that 10% stake would be worth, I think, close to $1 billion or something, like a huge investment of funds, right? Which would give you the liquidity to do something like a huge stadium. That seems like the perfect solution. Now, I'll say past history of the Bears ownership would make me guess that is something we would never, ever do with how close we're holding all of these shares and how George seems like he's going to die with this team. I don't think we're going to do that, but yeah, it seems like a perfect solution to the problems we have right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your instinct is right. I don't think that they would ever go for it. Even though it would be probably pretty appealing to private equity, the Bears especially, because
Yeah.
there is no team that has like just let their valuation just relative to what they should be when you look at the
Yeah.
fan base
Uh-huh.
have just absolutely missed the boat on taking advantage where, a
100%.
Jerry, say what you want about the Cowboys, but Jerry Jones, I mean, there's a reason that the Cowboys are worth like $12 billion or something
Seriously.
crazy, and the Bears, they're still probably top 10 as far as NFL franchise value, but
Hmm.
I mean, they should be top three, hands down.
For sure.
And when private equity groups look at, okay, where is the most upside to an investment, being able to, increase the value in a short amount of time, given all the pieces in place. I think the Bears would be a great target, but I don't think that they'll ever because I mean they sold 20% to Pat Ryan,
Hmm.
and I think it was Pat Ryan, one of his partners. I'm blanking on his name. Back in like 1990, for I want to say it was like maybe 20 to 30 million dollars.
Good
And
Crazy.
deal.
great deal, yeah. But so if they were to sell another 10% or 20%, your influence is really getting diminished. And it's like, yeah, I think that, despite the fact that they bought the team for $100, like
Yeah.
back in, the early 20s, I think that it's an asset that they regard as pretty sacred.
Yeah. I think the last couple points I want to talk about is, you mentioned it there with the idea of having the stadium in Chicago. And I think you look at teams like, Pat, you're moving to San Francisco soon. The Niners don't play anywhere near San Francisco right now. The Giants don't play in New York. It's uncommon for teams to play in their stadiums or in their cities, right? It's hard to get parking there. It's hard to meet the needs of your fans by being in a huge metropolitan area. And you start exploring other areas besides Arlington, this idea of Indiana kind of caught me off guard, and you brought up Gary, Indiana as well, and this idea of Northwest Indiana. Is that something that would like interest you? Jumping off the page for me, that gives me nightmares. It's something that I'm not very excited about at all. But I guess the idea of getting a stadium deal done with parking and fan, amenities is exciting. But are there any alternative areas that get you excited besides Arlington or Chicago? Is Indiana a realistic, area for you, or does that just make you want to throw up?
Makes me want to throw up. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
no offense to that state, but nobody wants to go there. Like there's,
Yeah.
it's and the thing is like, okay, immediately people will think about the Jets and the Giants. They play in
Sure.
a different state. Okay,
Hmm.
but the New York metropolitan area is not Chicago. There
Yeah.
are places that you can build within the state border that can, accommodate the Chicago Bears. Like the Meadowlands out there
Hmm.
in Jersey, it's like because everything is just so compacted together across New York, Connecticut, and Jersey. It's like, okay, that's kind of a specific situation that's unique to them.
Agreed.
Sorry, that's a long-winded answer of me saying no. It gives me a heart attack even the idea of them playing in Indiana.
Yeah. No, I agree. Is there anywhere besides Arlington that you think could be a realistic option?
But, besides Arlington and the
Or
Michael
Chicago,
Reese Center
obviously.
or
Yeah,
Chicago, um, none that I've seen. I mean,
yeah.
there was that period where like cities and towns were just throwing out,
Hmm.
proposals. I think to
Yeah,
just get some press for themselves.
yeah.
Naperville, having grown up there, I don't know where you would fit that thing.
Yeah,
Or if
right.
you want to talk about a nightmare traffic study, yeah, I feel like, Naperville already has its own traffic problems, and it's already like a giant suburb, and it's way the hell out there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Patrick, if you disagree. I haven't really seen any options that are realistic.
No, 100%. I think Arlington Heights is the only one that I've seen that seems like a realistic proposal. It was funny though, that brief period of time where like, oh, Aurora is throwing their name out there, and Naperville is like, hey,
Yeah, why not?
we'll take a shot. Maybe you want to come
Oh,
here.
Gurney threw their name out there.
Yeah, like
It's like,
what?
we'll,
Like
we'll
See
build it
what we can do.
right next to Six Flags. All
Right
right,
next to
come on,
Six Flags. Yeah.
we'll just
yeah.
repurpose the parking lot. Yeah.
It's just
So,
so funny. I mean, Kevin, to your point about nobody wanting to go to Indiana, I mean, like the state of Illinois is not, Chicago's doing a lot of heavy lifting for the state of Illinois, like moving the team to a completely
yeah,
another spot. Like, I don't know.
yeah,
I'm fine with Arlington, but Indiana is just like is a whole nother thing. And yeah.
yeah, and honestly, like, Indiana already has its own football team,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and trust
True.
me, like, I went to college in Indiana, and those people worship the Colts. So I mean, right now you've got some people in Northwest Indiana who, kind of, you can call them Bears fans, and they root for the Bears, but it's like true blue Chicago fans are going to be pissed about it. Do not want to, travel all that way, and you're not going to be poaching fans away from the Colts. So I really don't know what kind of a, benefit the Bears would be getting if they were to, follow through on a move like that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. To reiterate, I think I would throw up as well if this move was to happen. I think the last question that I have is kind of a two-parter encompassing, but Kevin, if you had to give a timeline, what do you think your most rough timeline could be? When they proposed the stadium last year, they said that, if production was to start that year, I think they said they could get it done in 2028. But I think there's been newer questions on if this job can get done at all. So I was wondering, do you think Kevin Warren, are the lights too bright for Kevin? Do you think he will get this done? And do you think if he could, rough estimate, do you think by 2030 we have a new stadium? 2035? Do you think a new stadium's coming at all? What do you think?
I mean, if he's serious about, you know, starting, like making an announcement and actually starting construction this year,
Hmm.
I think it's reasonable. You can get it done by 2030. If they go with the grand plan of Arlington that they put forward, which would be huge to do, not just the stadium, but like all the other stuff. If they were to
Hmm.
just get the stadium done, and then all the other, you know, other half of that racetrack site get developed, yeah,
Yeah.
I think 5 years is reasonable.
Yeah. That's fair. And you have confidence that he can get this done?
Um, I, um, I think that he can get this done. I think that there's a new sense of urgency to get this done.
Yeah.
And I think that, his job depends on it. I mean, I think that the last year, plus I mean, Kevin Warren has not done himself any favors in the eyes of Bears fans, frankly. And I think that, people were worried after the end of the season, that we might lose Ryan Poles, and Kevin Warren would be calling the shots. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if you and I, if we talked about this like just off mic at any point, but I was scared to death the idea of Kevin Warren like calling the
Yeah.
shots from a football, like,
Running
oh,
Oh my
point. Yeah.
God,
this
yeah.
guy who was just you, that is your one job, is to get the stadium done. Ultimately, that's why you were hired, and now you're going to be like, you know fitting in for Ryan Poles, and trying to make yourself out to be a football authority as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that also didn't help his public image. So I think that, there's an urgency that wasn't there before. I think he'll get it done. it's a matter of when they finally announce. The sooner he announces this thing, I think the better for everybody,
For
because
sure.
I don't know who he's negotiating with anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that assuming he's still going to be the president for the next several years, I think that yeah, he can get it done.
Man, here's hoping. Pat, you got anything to say?
I mean, I'll just say I remember when this news first came out and those renderings came out, everyone was very excited about the stadium. And then about 6 months went by and there was no real updates. And like we've said already, at this point, it's like people are more focused on the upcoming draft, Caleb Williams,
Yeah,
the free agency moves. We have so many other things that we're caring about. It's like, for me personally, so far in the back of my mind, what's going to happen in the stadium that at this point I'm just waiting for them to say we've started construction at either point, right? It's like I'm just ready
Just do
to
something.
just to have something started. If it's done, I see SoFi Stadium took about 4 years to make. So if we like started immediately, we would get it done by 2029 or 2020 or 2030. But at this point, I'm just wanting something, just something to
yeah,
start, just some good news.
yeah. Just it's like call me when you've got some news. It's
Exactly.
just you're toying with the fans for a year ago. People it was a topic of discussion. Now nobody cares. It's like
No.
if you guys can't get this together and we end up playing in perpetuity over the worst stadium in the NFL, so be it. We care more about the quality of the team and winning Super Bowls. So, and if that were to be the move, then that would be very Bears like for them to screw this up. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, I think, Kevin, that's a perfect way to end it, end your appearance here.
On that note,
Uh,
yeah.
good a place as any. Kevin, want to thank you again for coming on to the pod, always sharing your wisdom. You definitely have an angle that Pat and I do not possess on talking Chicago politics and finances, so we really appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's all we have to say. So, as we end every episode and every interview, we'll say bear down, baby.
Bear down.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Bear down.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Chicagolandians. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you want more Chicagolandians content, you can find us everywhere at Chicagolandians.